Hello, LinkedIn, Twitch, Periscope, YouTube, and Facebook. My name is Frank Lavinia, and that's right, I'm over here. I gotta recenter myself because when I split the view of the screen, let me turn off the chat overlay, get a little more real estate there. There we go. Clearly I've not had enough coffee. My name's Frank Lavinia, and to my immediate left is Andy Leonard, and I'm looking for Andy's. What happened to my card with you on it?
Oh, it's okay.
Man. Well, it's Andy Leonard.
Yes, it's me.
So we're recording this. This is going to be an episode of Impact Quantum. I can't talk. This is going to be an episode of Data Driven that we're recording live, and we're recording it live because one, we have three announcements. This was largely inspired by a live stream Andy did earlier today. So first off, let me start with this. This will more than likely be the episode that will get us over 200,000 downloads.
Woohoo!
I say more than likely because it is a predictive model, because it hasn't happened yet. But if you see our run rate for episodes tends to be in the within the first week or two, tends to be about 600 or 600 to 700, which is actually triple what it was a year ago. I would say.
It's gaining momentum. It's accelerating.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's kind of a long game, like,
Absolutely.
And I kind of, there's a keto podcast to listen to called Low Carb MD podcast, which if you do keto, I highly recommend. But I'm not going to bore people with that. But the interesting thing is that he hit 1 million downloads right away, and I did that whole compare and despair thing, right? Which of course is, I think, the backbone of social media is compare and despair. Right? That's how they make their money.
Are you sure about that? I'm being facetious. Apologies.
So I was like, but you know what? We're doing this podcast. We didn't think it would go more than to be this successful, and I'm gonna claim this success. You know what I mean? Like it's ours, right? And granted, dieting and health is probably a much wider market than kind of data science and AI.
Sure.
And that's okay, because we love our audience. Our audience, as far as I can tell, loves us. Don't want to be so arrogant to be like, oh,
it is a fantastic audience. I think not only are they smart, but they're also really good looking.
I agree.
Throw that out there. You can tell Frank and I are both a little punchy. The caffeine is kicking in.
Caffeine is slowly kicking in. Yes.
Almost 11 a.m. Eastern time, where you and I are, and a Friday. And it's been, I know we won't talk the details, but I know it's been a phenomenal week or two, really, for you, Frank.
Yeah.
You've enjoyed some tremendous success. Long time coming, a lot of work that you put into it, getting yourself ready, making yourself more valuable, and it's just really starting to show and pay off. Not quite pay off yet, but it's really close. I mean,
that's a good segue, Andy.
All of the things are just kind of coming together. Yeah, I meant to do that.
It's almost like we planned it, which is totally out of character for us. Kind of planning a show. I jest. We do some planning, but
true.
Most of the questions in the first episode when we talk to our guests are completely ad hoc. We've actually had, and this is something that surprised me, we've had a lot of good feedback about the last two shows, which have deviated from kind of the more technical side of things and more into the project management side of things.
Yeah.
And we actually have another show we're recording next week with a return guest. It'll be a surprise. What's interesting is that it's really resonated. And I was kind of thinking about that's who gets excited about project management, really? And I think I know what it is, Andy, but go ahead.
What is it?
I think bad project management is something every IT professional and certainly data professional faces, hands down.
Sometimes.
And I think that's why Well, I mean, if you think back in your career, like you think about how just the percentage, right, of when were projects really well managed versus when they weren't. And
Yeah.
I would say it's a 70-30 split, maybe 80-20. Um,
Yeah.
if you're
That's about
lucky,
my
50-50.
experience. And it's been, for me, it's been very polar. You and I both did software development in
Mhm.
our past, and especially there, I think part of it
Oh,
was
it's even worse
that
there. Yeah.
probably I was new. There was that I was younger and I needed the money, and so I did VB.
Good thing they didn't have OnlyFans back then, there, Andy.
And
And
somewhere,
for the parents out there who are listening in the car with their kids, I'm sorry about that.
yeah, that's okay. They hopefully they won't get it. It's like those Looney Tunes jokes that just went right over
Yes.
my head
Yes. You watch
when
them
I
again
was a
when you're
kid.
older, you're like, wait a minute. Was I
What?
there the whole time?
But yeah, I was younger, and most of in fact, statistically speaking, about 100% of my life up to this microsecond, I've been younger. I'm just saying. But I did software development there. I've kind of encountered heroes or zeros. When I went into data, it shifted a little, Frank. It seemed like we had again. I had grown older. That I'm sure part of the mix, but it seemed like I ran into more heroes than zeros there. So it's almost like two stories for me. But the guests we've had are simply amazing. The Alex Castro show we just posted a couple of days ago. I almost finished his audiobook. It's a short book. It's like 2 hours, but he really goes through. He doesn't exactly tell you how to collect the metrics or how to put them into his REM score is what he does there. But I wouldn't either. If I was selling that, he does. Here's what he does tell you: is he tells you what the metrics are, and and that it's eye opening enough. I would say it's enough to whet my appetite to definitely recommend people go to the site and sign up for that. And the whole idea here is amazing statistic. He begins with 50% of software projects or endeavors, IT endeavors inside of corporate America today, 50% fail. And when he starts putting some ROI, what he calls ROIC numbers on around that, it gets crazy fast.
Yeah, I listened to the first chapter and I'm like, oh my God, it is worse
Yeah.
than I thought.
And so when he starts talking, and he saves this to around the 3/4 mark, but when he starts talking about, hey, we should invest in, this, doing the REM score thing, walking through the exercises. He shares a use case where it took 9 months and it costs. I don't think he went through the cost, how much it cost. But at the end of that exercise, they were able to just start that project and just check the boxes. They just went right through it. The schedule didn't slip. They didn't have changes that surprised them. There were, they didn't run into any of those options that our former guest, who's been commenting on this, I think on LinkedIn, Dave
Oh,
Wenzel
you
was
gave it away.
mentioning.
You gave it away.
Oh no, this was
Okay.
his former
Oh,
thing he's
got
been
it, got it.
commenting on. Yeah, I didn't say anything. I can't pronounce that person's name, but it's like Dietz's law.
Wait. Oh yeah, Dietz. Yeah. This was something that about access and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's there's 10% of the stuff that's really easy, 80% that you can work through, and the other 10% is flat out impossible.
Right.
And you know, how many of that 10%? Well, you look at it and go, well, it's 90%, right? That's not how this works.
Right.
It's not.
It's only
You have to
10%
hit.
more.
Yeah,
Right.
really. You have to hit 100% to make this thing go. And it's just fascinating to kind of step back, take the statistics out of it just a bit. I mean, I know that sounds crazy.
Well, I
But
think there's a fallacy, and I'm sorry I cut you off.
that's okay. Go ahead.
Project management or software development, certainly software development, I think you can argue whether it's better or worse than data. It's probably worse than AI, but I'll drop that there. But definitely with software engineering, it's not a linear thing. Like getting from
No.
0 to 80 probably takes, there was a joke that, getting your project 90% done takes 50% of the time. The remaining 50% is that the final 10%.
That's fair.
Or from 90 to 98, and then the final 2% takes forever. Like it's kind of like that. Is it Zenon's paradox or Zenon's paradox?
I know what you're talking about.
The thing with the turtle.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why coffee is important. I almost said coffee.
I get it.
If you're just tuning in, this is why we have a British voice accented AI or voice actress as lead in the show, because it kind of makes it a little less East Coast.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say. Of course, Andy doesn't have an accent at all, but
not me.
I'll just leave that there. Well, I have my coffee and retool.
We describe that. We describe ourselves that way to some of our guests on previous podcasts. I say I'm the one that doesn't have an accent.
Right.
So you can keep us straight that way when we're doing the interview. It's a hoot. It's something Frank had the perfect reaction there. If it makes you giggle, great. If it doesn't, you're doing it wrong. Just straight up. You are. Life's too short.
Well,
get over the accent thing. Right?
So it's not linear, and I think there's an assumption that it's linear. Like so here's a tale of two projects, and that sounds like a good name for a LinkedIn article. Tale of two projects. Two projects I were on that kind of stand out. One was a project I worked on in Germany. It was for, the original name was Money Shelf. Eventually they changed it. It was a startup. It was a retail banking portal, wholly owned subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. And so, pretty big initiative, multinational. It was meant to work in Germany, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, and Belgium. And that was kind of the phase 2 and 3 rollout. Phase 1 was Germany.
Okay. Gotcha.
Many stories could be told from my time there, but the thing that really impressed me was the requirements that we were given, right? And they were still printed on paper, if you can believe that. So somebody actually hand drew what the forms and the pages and the site should look like.
Wow.
And then wrote out what everything should do. Right? Wasn't perfect.
No, but my gosh,
there. Like you look at the form, and there were a couple of times when I would call over my team lead and be like, all right, well, what do they mean by this? And then we'd go to the people who wrote it, and it's like, well, I hadn't really thought of that.
Yeah.
Now that was awesome, right? So those were wireframes, I think is what the cool kids call them, with requirements on them.
Yeah.
Fast forward to from 2000, 2001 to 2005, 2006, about when I met you, actually.
Right.
When I was in the midst of the worst project I'd ever been on.
I remember you talking about that.
It
wasn't pleasant.
It was most unpleasant. So don't want to give away any names.
Right.
But it was for a local university. Local being within an hour's drive. How will we genericize it that? Pretty big wonderful. University in the Richmond metro area. Oops. No. Fortunately, there's several, so you can use your imagination. This was the idea. It was an organizational behavior, organizational networking type initiative, and it was all we had were the wireframes. So we had the project manager, who was nicknamed Captain Chaos. This is how said project manager got the nickname Captain Chaos, because would just basically walk around and draw up what the application should look like.
Okay.
And handing it around and saying that those were the requirements.
That doesn't seem like enough.
Shockingly, it wasn't.
That's crazy.
particularly in this, because ultimately this was an organizational networking type project. So the idea was kind of LinkedIn, basically before LinkedIn, right? And at this point in time, MySpace was the social network, right? Was
Right.
what Facebook and all these things are today.
Right.
So, and they were very cautious because the researchers didn't want to call it a social network. They called it an organizational network. So the idea was you would figure out, the gist was you would send out these questionnaires, and the idea was to work with industry as well as academia. And people in companies would answer basic questions about who they knew in their company versus how many people they interacted with.
Okay.
And the idea was to kind of suss out these internal networks inside of a company, right?
Okay.
All very noble, all very fascinating work.
It's a great
However,
plan. What could possibly go wrong?
well, here's the thing. If you're working with academia, they're not exactly experts on project management.
Oh.
Neither was the consultants who were brought in
I see.
either. So like I was on this project briefly, and I had a lot of there was some animosity between me and Captain Chaos. And
I can imagine why.
well, no, this is even before all this, right? So
Okay.
and there's reasons, real and imagined, I think that is. But that having been said, I basically said to my manager at the time, good guy, by the way, real stand-up guy. And I said to him, I was like, yeah, this, when I saw the requirements document were basically a bunch of wireframes and kind of nebulous concepts, which I was like, I raised the red flag. And now I probably should have raised the red flag a little louder. But then again, because there was such animosity between this person and me, he just dismissed it as, you're just saying that because it's X. And so I'm like, I at that point I was like, I did my part. Okay.
Right.
But I'm going to sit back, get my popcorn and watch this unravel. Now that was bad karma. That was a bad decision on my part. It was very immature. You're talking about being mature. Because one, it's bad karma, right? Two,
yeah.
Or whatever it is you believe in, right? Like that's not the point, right?
Right.
Being a jerk is still being a jerk, period. And I paid for that. Now, how I paid for that? I got pulled into this project. After its first crash and burn. And I say first crash and burn because there were about 4 crashes and burns.
Ow, Frank.
Each one exponentially worse than the one before. And a lot of it was the fact there really were no requirements. The things that were being called requirements were wireframes.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of that and therapy via live stream. But I mean, ultimately it boiled down to, he's right. Like, both these two guests, Alex and Christopher, both touching on that, which I think is something that we can all relate to. We all have this project. Fun fact, co-author on my first and thus far only published book was on me on that project. And basically anyone who had touched that project was basically considered untouchable at said consulting firm.
Oh, wow.
Which I then left. But if you're on LinkedIn, you can probably figure out who it is with the figure out all this stuff.
Sure.
But, but that's not the point. The point is that project management, I think, is assumed to be linear. One thing that I remember hearing when I was overseas was that German kind of project management tends to be you plan things to the extreme.
Sure.
And then your implementation time is shorter.
Right.
Is that 100% true? I don't know. But I would say that based on these two experiences that, 1 day in planning equates to potentially weeks, sometimes even months, an implementation.
That is I was going to say that is a hard thing for software developers to learn.
Absolutely.
But it was just me.
No,
I'm ADHD, and it was I was at that point in my life where I made the jump from coding in VB mostly over into and VB6, by the way, not .NET. It was before .NET. Right about the time .NET was coming out.
Right.
I became I was an MCSD actually for a while, and it's
Microsoft
right around that
Certified
time.
Solutions Developer, for those wondering what that acronym
And
is.
there's still, I don't know if that's still valid or not. I don't know.
I think they've changed it a few times, but it's basically like, but yeah, you were a big deal. You were smart.
I wasn't. I took the tests, and anyway, it was what it was. The stopping and thinking, even if a day is extravagant, even now,
right?
But just do it for 15 minutes or an hour, or sit down with the team and whiteboard this, right?
Yes.
And it's what the craziest things happened, right? So we'd go into a Scrum meeting, and without announcing, or not a Scrum meeting, but we were looking at setting up the burn down. That's about an hour, a good hour, 2 hours, depending on the complexity of the project. But the whole idea is you start on the whiteboard and you put the end, the round, my camera's making me back, but you start on the right and you work your way back to the left.
Right.
And it spiders out, right? It's not a line. It starts here and it starts doing all of this bifurcation. And at the end of that, you got a fair outline of like the high level tasks that are going to be assigned, a 1 to 3 day stuff that if you're doing Scrum, that's what you do. We also encountered a couple of things where it was like Scrum is not the right way to approach this. That was rare because mostly we were developing, but I can remember 1 or 2 efforts where we were tuning. I think that one comes to mind. We were performance tuning. And the reason that Scrum didn't work for that is because you just didn't know what the next effort was going to unpack. Right. You didn't know what you were going to find. So you could still do, I heard somebody once say Scrum, but we're doing Scrum, but we're not doing this. We're not doing burn downs. We're not doing stand-ups, whatever.
Right.
Scrum, but I think that's kind of the approach we took because we like the cadence. And you got to go with what works. But yeah, I totally, a couple of things came out of the story while you were telling it there. One is maybe we could fix that whole first one and only book thing.
I totally should do that. That's totally on me. I have some ideas, but ideas, to quote Gary Vaynerchuk, are, well, I'm not going to say the word, but Gary Vaynerchuk used colorful language, but basically referred to them as feces, and It's execution that matters. So one, that's the only thing. But while we're on the topic of kind of self-improvement gurus, which you said, something that they all say, almost all of them say, have the common thing. I'm a self-improvement guru junkie, right? I can tell you that if you had to boil down their all their messages to like one sentence, it'd start with the end in mind. And what I think, particularly with software development, I think also with data and AI projects as well, is you start with the end in mind. What do you want to build? What are you trying to do?
Right.
What is that? And then work backwards from there, which is basically what you just said.
Think through that.
Right.
And then I would say the third step is execute on it. And that's something you and I keep encouraging each other on. And some folks look at the stuff Frank does and the stuff that I do. I know because I get these questions. I know Frank gets the same questions. Like, how do you get so much done? Right. And it's like, every day we do something. That's what the whole 1,000 days is about.
Right, which is a great segue into the next segment.
Talk about the 1,000 days, Frank.
Right. So I'll put a bow on the previous part on kind of why I think project management is resonating, because it's something that everybody has to deal with.
Yes.
Because somebody always has a boss, and they're going to want to report progress. And I think that that's probably why this data-driven approach, which is a great name for a podcast, by the way. I mean, now that we have the data, we can collect the data. We have numbers of years of like, well, this worked, that didn't work. I think that's the next logical step. So 1,000 days. So the background on this 1,000 days thing was, I was laying in bed and kind of half awake, and I get a notification on my phone, and it was a Clubhouse notification. And now Clubhouse is on, can I do this? Yeah, I can do this with this window. Clubhouse is on Android now, so you don't have to be just
What?
on that. Yeah, it's on Android now.
I'll have to sign up. I have been avoiding it because I couldn't get it to work.
What's weird is that it was the hot thing when it was kind of invite only, and then
Right.
just iOS only, and even then, I have an older iPad it wouldn't work on, so it became
Oh,
like this
wow.
whole it became this whole like thing where there
I
was
gotta get
one
on that
device in
thing.
my possession I was able to listen to Clubhouse on.
Yeah,
So,
I'm going there now.
um,
Got my phone. I'm doing the.
there was this notification, and what you can do is you can follow people, and I think my name in there is Frank Diggs Data. I should probably know that. But anyway, I signed up for notifications when Grant Cardone is speaking. Grant Cardone, someone Andy and I have talked a lot about. We won't bore you with the details. So I get this notification, and it was like Grant Cardone is speaking, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it was on this this group called Breakfast with Champions, and this lady who was on, I forget her name. Grant Cardone was talking, and he basically, apparently, it was what's her name? Something. Here we go. It was Danielle Delgado.
Okay.
So apparently, Danielle Delgado and Grant Cardone were our friends, and they were at the house, and this guy, whose name I totally blanked out on. Fortunately,
Wait,
I have it.
you sent it to me.
Glenn Lundy.
Yeah.
They took a picture, and it was a couple of years ago, and it was basically him saying, he came with, it was about 1,000 days ago, basically. And then he kind of had this revelation while he took the selfie, and he told Grant Cardone, he took a selfie with Grant Cardone and then this lady, and said, I'm going to be successful or something like that. And he kind of had this epiphany. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, he goes, well, you know what? For the next 1,000 days, I'm going to do this. He explains the whole story better than I think I can.
Sure.
And I was like, and then basically she came on and she was speaking, Grant and her were speaking, and they were talking about how, if you just improve a little bit every day for 1,000 days, you would be shocked to see how your life goes. And I just, I don't know, for some reason.
I'm taking my profile picture, Frank, for the.
You're taking your profile picture. Cool.
For Clubhouse. Yeah.
And
wow, it looks just like me. Gosh.
Figure that. Funny that.
Go ahead. The next 1,000 days.
So
what would your life be like if you did this for the next 1,000 days?
Right. And you just pick 3 things. And I think they, I wrote it down because it was that good. And assuming I could find it. Right. So basically pick 3 things you're going to do for the next 1,000 days. And for me, I chose live stream, workout, and fast. So I do intermittent fasting, right? Again, a keto thing. I'm not going to bore you with the details.
Yeah.
But, how would your life change if you did that? And it doesn't have to be anything big. I mean, I streamed yesterday for like 10 minutes because I had, 10 minutes of time.
Yeah.
And I had a great conversation with folks who joined the live stream, and that's something that would not have happened. Now multiply that times 1,000. You kind of get the vibe of what it is. So that's kind of it. And then you even came up with a SQL script to figure it out. I was lazy. I asked Alexa to figure it out for me. Like, hey, what's
well, that was smart, actually. I just I've got a bunch of SQL scripts that I keep around. One is people probably know, if you're regular, you know this. If you're not regular, it's okay. Welcome, by the way. Become a regular. Subscribe and all that. But we start our year November 1st. So this is New Year's week for Frank and I. And I've got an old script from way back, and I just update the next November 1st, and I started counting down with I just updated the date to 2022, and it tells me how many dates are between there. Frank and I will share this back and forth. It's a way we encourage each other. We'll say there's so many days left. Like now there's 360 days.
361.
361 till November 1st. And we're doing it 997 to July 29th, 2024. That's 1,000. And we just keep because this may be hard for you to believe. So are you seated? Frank and I are not up and firing on all cylinders all the time. Sometimes we get down for various reasons and we need encouragement. And what
Do you
I
know why that
love
is?
about it, why is that, Frank?
Because we're human.
We are human,
That's
despite
why.
evidence to the contrary. But absolutely, we are human, and we're up some and down some. What almost always happens is when one of us is down, the other one is up, and we just every day, literally every day, we're communicating and reminding each other and saying, "Let's go get it." And if Frank does something that he can't share publicly that was a big win for him, he can hit me, and I always do. I do a love it or a applause or something back to him, and vice versa. Do the same thing. So if you don't have a friend like that, like Frank, go find a friend like Frank. I just
We
have
should
to.
start like a group on Facebook or LinkedIn. That's like a private
We,
group where if you need that sort of thing.
you
That'd be
know,
cool.
the mastermind idea
Yes.
leaps to mind because we've reached that point where we give away a lot. Don't get me like
Right.
this is free. We give away a lot, but it's gotten to that point where I don't know about you, Frank, but I'll say it this way: I won't be able to stay married and give away more. It's just not because my relationship's in trouble. It's not, but it's just because there's so much going on right now, and I've already kind of time boxed stuff, and you did too. You actually inspired me to do that, and I just chop it off, at a certain time every night. Oh,
Hey, Vanessa.
Welcome.
You
Oh,
that
that's
group?
awesome.
She's cool. She and I are in another class with Lillian Pearson.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah. She's in that. She's
Welcome,
awesome.
Vanessa.
She's
It's nice to meet you.
data scientist, SQL expert, and mostly self-taught, I think.
So many people are self-taught in this. I was going to say the best, and that's my experience.
And Vanessa, I got that wrong because I know you have a degree as well, but I'm not sure which came first. But Vanessa's definitely she's really cool, super smart.
We should get her on the show.
Totally, yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's set up an interview and join us on Data Driven or Impact Quantum, wherever
there you go,
wherever the fun is.
Awesome. I'll send you an IM. We have this fancy Calendly thing going on now, which my Power Apps integration needs a little TLC. I'll just put it that way. Oh, the business degrees. Oh, cool. So you understand both sides of things. Cool. But no, so there was an interesting thing. It might have been a Tai Lopez Instagram post. Now I know Tai Lopez is hard. Well, it's very easy to think of more polarizing people than Tai Lopez, but he's just flip on the news, right? But Tai Lopez, people love him or they hate him, right? And I will admit, when I first saw this guy, and you've probably seen him on YouTube because he was in a lot of the ads, like
he's an acquired taste.
He is an acquired taste, but once you acquire it, it's like I get it. I get his wisdom.
Right.
Like, go to his podcast, go to the first couple episodes, and you'll literally. If I went to a podcast meetup, this is way back in 2017.
Wow.
I went to a meetup where we actually go in person. You believe that? No masks, no nothing.
What?
It's like seems like a lifetime ago.
It does. The before times.
And this lady who she was retired captain in the army or corporal. She was in JAG, right? Basically a lawyer, right? A lawyer. And she's like, "Oh, my favorite podcast is Tai Lopez," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Because at the time, Tai Lopez was known for showing off his Lamborghinis, being amongst scantily clad women, and I was surprised that this was her favorite podcaster. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And then she kind of did this explanation, and she goes, "Just listen to the first 3 episodes. You'll know right away." And the first 3 episodes, this guy that all I had known him for was like, he was on a treadmill desk going like, "Hey, I love books. I love my Lamborghinis too, but books are really important." But the way he did it was just so like cringy. But then you listen to him, and you listen to more than just the first couple of minutes. Like, the guy is super smart, like super motivated. I mean, just really wise. And one of the things that getting back to it, because you know how we are about the rabbit holes, right? Is if clocks worked the other direction. In other words, instead of counting how many hours since midnight, minutes and hours since midnight, it worked the other direction where you saw a countdown. You would treat your time differently.
Wow. That is wise.
And I was like, that kind of stuck me. So ever since then, I've been doing like the, you know, how many days until next year, or how many days until this. Like,
right.
If you think of time that way, you would be a lot. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I do waste time. I binge watch Squid Game. You know, I binge watching now another show on Apple TV because I got a free 3-month subscription.
Nice.
Invasion and Foundation were both pretty interesting. But
yeah, I saw the reviews about Foundation and they kind of scared me. And I don't have.
It's kind of mixed. So. It's kind of mixed. Like I kind of like it. There's some things I like about it, and there's some things that are just like they're trying too hard. Apple's trying to come up with their own Game of Thrones type thing, their own Doom type thing.
Yeah, I get that. And that actually Foundation would work for that. You could probably pull that off.
And they're trying. You know, it's okay. That's all I'll say. It's okay. Gotcha. I mean, it's fun enough to watch. You know what I mean? Gotcha. It's not. And it's also its first season too. So let's see if they get a second season and they find their legs. Right. If you look at like the great shows of the past, like you know Star Trek and Next Generation.
Oh yeah, first season was. Well, I take that back. The original Star Trek. I actually watched the first season not long ago, and I don't have time to binge watch. I watch about an hour TV a day now, and that's about 59 more minutes than I used to watch. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, the first season of Star Trek had some incredible episodes in it. Like,
well, that show's kind of its own. Like, that's kind of its own thing. But I meant like the Next Generation, even Deep Space Nine.
Get you.
Which is one of my favorite shows of all time. The first season is a little like they're trying to find their sea legs. You know what I mean?
Right. But yeah, I'd love to. You know, I did. I watched Squid Games. I didn't binge. It took me like 2 weeks, I think, to watch it. And yeah, it was a couple of us in the house that wanted to see it, so we kind of timed it where others were out. I'm just not. I don't have to watch, you know, one thing after another another. The last thing that I watched that was any time involved with it was Longmire, and it's a set in Durant, Wyoming. It's based on a series of books. There's like almost 20 books, maybe more than 20 books, and I enjoyed the show. I won't say, you know, everybody that watches this is going to enjoy it, but it struck a couple of chords with me. One of them that won't strike with you is my dad, who passed away a couple years ago, was a big Louis L'Amour fan. And
he wrote Called the Wild Guy, right?
No, he was Westerns. He was writing Westerns. That's okay. That was Jack. What was his last name? Jack
London.
London. Yeah, Jack London did that. Great books. He wrote a couple of great books. And they worked him into Star Trek The Next Generation. And maybe one of my favorite episodes, the one where they had Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah.
Jack London was also in that episode. That was just written. Some of those episodes in Star Trek The Next Generation were as good, if not better, than some of the movies.
I was going to say some.
But I started reading the books. I'm on like book 5 of the Longmire series now. It's different. I mean, the characters, there's a lot of the same characters, but there's enough differences in it to keep it interesting. And I don't know. I don't know why I like it, but I do.
So I probably won't watch another hour of TV until The Expanse premieres at this point. Like I kind of do that. Like,
when is that?
December 10th or December 16th.
The last book comes out on the 30th.
Right. November. And I was reading the description of the book. Sorry, we're down a rabbit hole.
As
I wear my Martian Congressional Republic Navy hat.
We're looking for a way to work that in. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And if you have no idea what we're talking about, The Expanse is a series set about 200 years in the future. And we'll get to what that means for the final topic of today's show.
That's true.
What we've been calling Project Ringgate. And that actually comes from... That's a segue, not just the kind you ride around.
No.
So the so it's an interesting kind of this. There's a lot I think going on in that book, but ultimately it's kind of like the Earth, Mars has been colonized in its own independent country, and then there's the people who live in the belt who kind of are mostly neglected and or abused by both Earth and Mars.
Yeah.
And Mars kind of started off as, we're going to tell the UN what to do because there's number of catastrophes. There's only one government on Earth. And then they kind of start becoming kind of the bullies out in the belt too. So they're not perfect either. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic between kind of these three different parties, if you will. And that kind of inspired us to create the Data Channel, which I will share my screen once again.
Which is live.
You
can find us in the App Store.
That's right.
And
any App Store.
Right. Play, Google Play, the Apple, iTunes. Yeah, there it is. The only one not up is Android TV.
Right.
But the rest of these, we are there.
We are there. I should probably double click on that later and find out why that is. So the cool thing about this is that this ultimately kind of, and why we called this Project Ringgate was because I was on a call back when I was at Microsoft and with all the people in the MTC US. MTC US is probably one of the most elite teams at Microsoft. Shout out to my former colleagues. And we had gotten a free subscription to a service. I won't name them. And ultimately the bunch of us asked, like, well, how do we become authors on this platform? And the answer we got, and I don't think it was meant with ill intent. I just think the salespeople didn't know who they were talking to. They're like, well, we're very selective about, who we get to be as authors and whatnot. And that rubbed me and apparently a few other people too the wrong way. So that kind of got me, that kind of stuck. It was like a rock in my shoe. Like I just didn't, I consumed the content on the platform, and if you follow me on Instagram, you can probably figure out exactly what I'm talking about. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And this thing, I'm like, and then there was another platform that I think has also gotten kind of too big for the britches too. And I thought, what if there was a training site or a streaming service that was more by the people in the field? You know what I mean? Not just these quasi-academic types that made this content more approachable in terms of financing it, cost and things like that.
Sure.
And available on all these platforms, right? Which not all these are. You can't watch LinkedIn Learning on TV. Now, yeah, I guess you can do an AirPlay thing, but you can't.
Sure.
Right? You can watch Pluralsight, for instance, on Fire TV, but you can't watch it on Roku. I don't know why. And if you do a search for Roku Pluralsight, there's this really odd result you get. Like, we are no longer available in the Roku store. Like,
not sure why, but
just the phrasing of it just tells me that there's a good story behind that one.
The Data Channel is, and we are, I think, competitively priced right now.
Absolutely.
The subscribers that have signed up have gotten good deals that I believe, Frank, are they for life? I think they are.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't cancel, you get that rate forever. The yearly rate, it's just a great deal. And when you look at it right now, it looks like, you may look at that and go, wow, the Data Channel looks like it's just a bunch of people getting started. And the reason is we're a bunch of people getting started.
Yeah.
That's it. We're not going to hide that. We're going to own it.
Right.
But you wait. Frank and I both are thinking a few steps ahead every time. Frank's a much better chess player than me, but we're doing things like thinking about hitting November 1st, hitting July 29th, 2024. What are the steps between here and then? That's where our vision is. And
that's how Dingo came about.
Exactly.
Dingo came about when I was like, how do I scale blog creation? Right. And I had a bunch of other hacks and things like that I still will intermittently use, but
you had tinkered around with this idea before, the components of this idea. And I remember us talking about it, and I don't know if it helped or hurt or whatever, but I remember fussing at you about it. I'm like, come on, get this stuff going.
But I mean, ultimately, that's kind of what we are. And that's what we call a Project Ringgate, because in the world of the Expanse, there was I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's something called the ring gate that forms, season 4, season 3,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
and that kind
I
of
don't know. Was
changes.
it early? It may have been earlier than that in the show.
I think it was still on Sci-Fi when it came on, so I think it was season 3.
Okay.
Because
But yeah, the
season,
idea is you go through this, right? And you're in this other space. And it's, again, we won't spoil it, but I'll just say there it goes through some drama. And then another thing happens, and it turns out that there are over 1,300 gates that open out of this space and go into other solar systems that are habitable. And it really wrecks the dynamic, especially for Mars,
right?
because Mars is in the middle of a big terraforming effort. And yeah, so
that's kind of the analogy, is that this thing
we want to
changes the
open
balance
this.
of power
Right.
in the solar system. And I want Data Channel not just to be a streaming service, although that's
Yep.
what it is,
Yep.
but also approach kind of learning as more of a streaming service, as a streaming service activity, rather than kind of this traditional, no disrespect. I've been, to lynda.com or LinkedIn, like I've been consumers.
Sure.
I remember getting CDs that were like 2,000-3,000 a pop for courses on Photoshop in the 90s. Yeah. And those were like gold, like platinum. Like I would watch them.
Yeah.
I'd borrow them. I'd like be glued to the CRT monitor, and so ultimately that's kind of the so I think that the world has evolved in terms of how we learn. Pandemic, I think, threw fire on that, threw gasoline on that fire.
Yep.
But ultimately, I want to change the way that's done. I want to change how content's created. That's why we thought Ring Gate would be an appropriate type of metaphor.
And it's growing slowly, but we're getting more content out there, getting more content ready. After that, we're brainstorming. We've got another brainstorming session that is brewing. It would be interesting maybe to see how these things go, but it starts with a stream of text back and forth. Hey, we need to get together. Hey, we need to talk. Right. and eventually we get together and I fill up pages of notes on ideas and stuff to execute on. Speaking of that, we do have, let's see, we've talked about Ringgate. We've talked about the podcast, the coming up on 200,000, which is just incredible. I was trying to think, is there anything else we need to talk about, Frank? Did we want to talk?
That's it. I would say that Vanessa, who was commenting earlier, I told her about the idea of Ringgate pretty early on, like last December-ish, maybe January.
Yeah, we started about then. Yeah, it was like November, December, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so we are talking about a third podcast. That's
right. We didn't mention that.
We didn't mention the third podcast. So part of what we've been able to do with Dingo and kind of the automation systems that we have is have the ability to produce more content. And now, more shows are data driven, certainly a great idea.
Yep.
And that, if you notice, we've been keeping to a much more regular cadence. We've also
thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa.
We agree.
Yes, it feels great. It felt great to finally hit the publish button on that and get that sorted out. But yeah. So one of the things that I think that is become increasingly more important. Obviously, we started the Impact Quantum podcast, right? Which is kind of, when I was looking around for materials to learn about quantum computing, there was really a shortage of ones that are geared towards software developers or data people, right? And so that kind of was the rationale for that. I also think that the recent announcements, and even before the recent announcements, I was talking with Noelle Silver, who I work with at Microsoft and at another company. Very smart lady. She was one of the original engineers on Alexa. She has her finger on the pulse of kind of what's coming next. Mm-hmm. She's obviously been in AI for a while too, and she was telling me that she'd got an Oculus Rift. This is like back in September. And we were kind of having, again, similar text conversation with her. And she was telling me how great Oculus was. And I was like thinking like, I don't know, like, and it was based on her Oculus Quest. I'm sorry, Oculus Quest 2. Sorry.
Right. No, I know. That's the only reason I typed that into our
No,
private
you're
chat.
right. You're right. Let me hold on 1 second. I'll go get it.
Okay. Yeah. So Frank has picked this up, and my sons have both got one now,
Right.
and
So
they're working around with them, playing around, goofing off. And between Frank and my boys, I'm like, I need to get me one of these.
yeah, I mean these things. I mean, what's interesting about this? Actually, Costco sells them now too. Actually,
Nice.
so I mean, if something goes mainstream, it's probably going to end up in Costco, right?
True.
I actually picked up. Where is it? It's very easy to misplace these things, I guess. But at Wegmans, which is a supermarket on the East Coast, they had VR goggles that you just drop your phone in.
Right.
And that was like $20, right? So this is, $200. But when I last looked at this space, I was at a Microsoft store in Bethesda, and it was closer to $600-700. Plus, you needed a high-end PC to run it, right? So it was like,
Right.
and there was always the HoloLens, right? Like, HoloLens somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000, depending.
Yeah.
And I've had a HoloLens on. I've played with a HoloLens. It's an awesome tech. $3,000 is a heavy lift. But for $200-300 is not. And I tell you, like, the well was right. Like there is something to it. Now, for context, I've been playing around with VR off and on. Oh my God, maybe 20, 30 years, right? So, my first VR experience was about the same time as the Lawnmower Man came out. They had an arcade in the South Street Seaport in New York City. And for $5, you can get 2 minutes in this VR headset and kind of look around. And it was all polygons. Like, it wasn't anything fancy, but I was fascinated with it. A couple of years later, it surfaced at a nightclub in New York. And, and then VR ML came out. Mm-hmm. And I put some stuff on Frank's World with VR ML. And then after, in 2002, 2003, they had Adobe Atmosphere, which was kind of this world building experience.
Yeah.
I did a lot with that. I built a replica World Trade Center, built a little old West town back on that Jack London, Louis L'Amour theme there. Built a number of worlds on there. And that was really a fascinating kind of developer community. Adobe killed the product, said that they were going to put 3D into Acrobat, which it's 2021. Still haven't seen it. But so I've been playing around with this space off and on, and it's kind of always been like, it's like trying to light a match. You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes a few strikes.
Yeah.
This is the closest I've seen. I don't know if it's perfect because there's definitely some clunkiness around it, and there's definitely some privacy concerns given that Oculus is owned by Facebook, which did the Philip Morris thing, right? Their name was so damaged public perception wise that they had to change their name. Richmond folks will get that because Philip Morris is a major employer in that area. But it's an interesting concept, and I've been playing around with their Horizon, their workspace. I've even streamed a few of it live because I'm so proud of myself. I figured out how to get that up piped through LinkedIn Live. It's definitely very cool, and there's definitely things about it that I think work. Now the question is, what's the killer app, right? For the internet, it was probably email. For the web, it was e-commerce. For mobile, it was probably social. For VR, AR, I don't know what it's going to be. And that's exciting because we're still early in on this. And I've created a few worlds. I've actually started building a virtual World Trade Center in Facebook Worlds, Facebook Horizon. Nice. There's definitely something there. So we're going to start another podcast. The website is up, but I'm still trying to. If you've ever worked with WordPress, right? It's awesome because you can start with a template. It's awful because the template has its own way and its own way of thinking about things. So you have to fight with the template. This is true on impactquantum.com, right? Impactquantum.com. There's still some oddities that are related to the template. Now, part of that is I'm not a WordPress developer. Right. I never even played one on TV. I would love to learn it, but again, I have AI, data engineering, kind of that's what pays the mortgage.
And your day job.
And
right?
my day job, right?
That's it. Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those things where, again, part of this is, well, giving away stuff for free is awesome. We've given a lot to the community, but also kind of like, I could probably hire somebody to do this off Fiverr or whatever. But again, it's hard to justify until there's some kind of money coming in. So, you help support the show. We are working on a plan that if other people other than us come up with content for Data Channel, we would do some kind of revenue sharing. We're trying to figure out what that would look like. Part of it is we wanted to launch and see what sorts of, as you know, I'm big on automation. There's no automated way to do that in the platform that we're using.
Not yet.
So, what's that going to look like? We want to see what happens when we don't want to promise something and then not deliver on it. Ultimately.
Right. Yep. So in order to do revenue sharing the way we'd like to do it, we need accurate counts of who's watching what.
Right.
We don't really want, actually all we need, that's all we need is the count. We don't need to know the list of names or what have you. We just need to know this person tuned in and they watched this show. So, which
is how the big players do it too. Like
it is. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? It's all driven by views, by eyeballs. Right. And so we want to do that. And we're looking at just a bunch of different things that we might be able to do to be, I don't know, fair, I think is the best word, maybe.
Well, just also kind of keeping to that original spirit is, we're trying to disrupt an existing kind of ecosystem that is coalesced into 2, maybe 3 large camps. What could we do to reimagine that? What could we do to make this more accessible, right?
Yep.
And
so we're looking at formats. I love this idea, doing the formats. The couple of formats that we've talked about, I think, are very compelling. And Frank had an idea the other day that just boggled my mind. I was like,
I did.
But yes, no, you do this a lot. But it was just a beautiful thing because it's an elegant, very platformy driven perspective.
Oh, yeah, no, I think I remember.
I think you remember. I don't want to say it because I don't want to get out and people steal it.
I'll have to talk to you later on a text.
Yeah, it's a great idea. The thing is, the seed for the idea, I remembered seeing a video that's like 8 years old, something that where another platform has kind of blossomed and flourished. So anyway, we'll see where that goes. I'm excited because now that we're out and we have subscribers, we can kind of sort of see what the reports look like. We can send the people we're dealing with are extremely communicative. So that was just, Frank found them, and like he said, about a year ago, around Thanksgiving, and we started chatting with them, and it took a year, but just about to get things out.
80% of that was us. Like,
to be fair, it wasn't them. We had to do content. There was that. We had to figure out what we wanted to do. And as Vanessa said, it is nice to see it in prod and moving forward. So now we've launched. We get to tweak and see how it goes from here. But use
Vanessa,
those codes.
Remind me, I'll get you a free code. You can access it. So I'll ping me if I forget to IM you. But here's our code. So if you go to datachannel.tv, I think you can do this in the apps as well, but I haven't found a way to introduce the coupon codes in the apps. But I will have to do some experimenting with that. But ultimately, it's best thing to do is go to datachannel.tv. If you want to pay $4.97 per month, $4.97 per month, just use launch $4.97, and it's $47 a year.
Something like that for the Data Channel for life.
And that's
right
for life. Those are the 2 coupon codes. We do have a limited number of those. And if you're
supplies are limited.
Creating scarcity, right? But I mean, ultimately, we kind of came to 2 price points that we think we can launch with, we can work with, and then grow into. The full price is like $14.97 a month, and whatever that times 12 is.
$149. There was some minimum that we had to
there's a
charge at
minimum
one of the
mandatory charge.
stores. Yeah. So to make that fair, we had to charge that at all of them. So
Right. So
we're learning, if once we get a bajillion subscribers, maybe we can start dictating back to the stores. I don't expect that'll ever happen with a couple
we can
of stores.
stream from our boats, from our yachts.
There we go. We can build our own platform.
We can build our own platform. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's kind of what we did, Frank, when we think about it, right? As you were telling the story about it, it was kind of like it wasn't malicious by any stretch, but we just kind of looked at some of the feedback. It's interesting. I know who Frank's talking about, and you probably do too. It's not hard to figure out when he says they got the, they got kind of the smarmy response, where you have to be a pretty big deal.
And like everybody at the MTC, I don't work there anymore, right? So I don't have to kiss anyone's, right? Like everyone at the MTC, everyone at the MTC is a genius, like for real. Like, and each one of them could be right up there with any one of their authors, guaranteed.
And I was like, so here's the funny story: is they actually reached out to me about 15 years ago, and I shared the. I asked for feedback, and anyway, we went back and forth, got the contract and looked at it, and I went, eesh. And I asked a great friend at the time, a friend of ours who's passed away, Brian Moran. And I said, what do you think? And he said, that if they enforce this, it's kind of going to cut into how you're living right now, how you're paying your bills. And I was like, oh, okay.
I also had interviewed to be an author on their platform, and I was accepted actually with there was a Silver
really? I didn't know that.
Part of the story. You know how the story ended, because at the time I was working at a company, and again, you can probably figure
I do know. Okay, now I remember. Yes.
Yeah, so this was them. So I was all set to do a course for them on, might have been data binding in XAML, like some really weird niche kind of Silverlight WPF thing. And I was all excited about it. And then the company I worked for at the time, I got a phone call. I'm at my desk, and they're like, "Oh, have you started it yet?" And I'm like, "No, I just got approved." And they're like, "Oh yeah, any money you make off that comes to us." I'm like, "No, it doesn't." He goes, "Yeah." And then, so the next 2-3 days, there was the partner / co-founder of said consulting company was trying to convince me why that's a great idea, and I was not convinced. If there was a Morgan Freeman voiceover, and Frank was not convinced. So I basically, about the same time, the second edition of my book would have come out too, because they were trying to get their royalties on that, and as well. And they were basically saying, a book that I had written before even joining this company, they basically said, "Hey, those royalties, we'll let you have the royalties you already earned and keep those." I'm like, "Well, thank you very much." And anyway, so basically I kind of did the math on it in the time, and I was like, the time it would take. And my son was like an infant at the time. And I'm like, the whole reason I'm doing it is to make money for the family. And if I have to get rid of most of that money, they'd let me keep some of it. And I was like,
that was nice of them when you think about it.
I called
very kind.
It was very kind of them. I called up the company and I said, I'm out because, look, I want to do it, but not under these circumstances. I called up my publisher and said, I'm out of the second edition of the book too.
Yeah.
And which is a Silverlight book. So the timing of the publishing would have hit right about the same time as the Silverlight apocalypse. So,
well, I said no in the end. It was very interesting that I was asked. I found it very flattering, and I'm still friends with the founder. And we communicate every now and then, just how things are going and stuff like that. I think it's awesome, the success that they've had. And interesting side note is they asked another lady to do the topic they wanted me to work on, and she did it. And for a few years, she would come up to me and say, "Thank you for saying no."
That's cool.
So the agreement we had was, I don't want to know how much money you make, because I'm sure she did well. And she probably did better than I would have done on that topic. She's amazing. So anyway.
So we got a bit of feedback from Vanessa on a private message. She's having trouble accessing it at that URL.
Are you doing www, Vanessa?
We got to fix that.
Yeah, I know that's
I thought
an
I
issue.
fixed that. I thought I fixed that, but it keeps coming back. So I'm working with their support to do that. Thank you for letting us know. If you out there in the audience have that problem, just follow the link on the show notes page or wherever you're listening to us. Yeah, that will have the link that would hopefully work.
Yeah, I'll just try it again because I did it this morning.
Intermittently, it does it. In Edge, it does
one
thing.
It works.
In Chrome, it does something else.
In Edge, it just flips right over because it figured it out.
Yeah, and I've gotten feedback from the team is apparently I set up the redirect to the domain wrong, which is totally not surprising because I deal with redirects on domains like once or twice, 3 times a decade. So like my knowledge of DNS is kind of, wait a minute, I do this, I do this, I do that. So it's totally on me. It's not their fault. We use Odium. Yeah. Big shout out to Odium. They've been awesome. And
they have been.
So yeah, so there it is. There's the URL that so far seems to work every time for me. Okay. Thanks, Vanessa, for letting me know. Vanessa says it needs the www, which probably sounds about right.
That's what I've encountered. Yeah.
Which would jive with the fact that there's some kind of DNS record that it would automatically hunt for.
I use GoDaddy for almost all of these, and it will.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Like it.
Right.
It's
but it'll ask you which one you prefer.
I use domain.com.
Yeah, and I've got one over there, but I haven't played with it enough to know. But
it's a setting I messed up. I'm positive.
Oh, okay.
So I have to look for that. So
we'll
be on the lookout.
There, Frank.
We have Impact Quantum has been rocking. We've got some great guests. Lynn Langit was actually the first person to be on both shows.
Yeah.
And
wait, Brian Lanham?
Brian Lanham was awesome. His book is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But with that, we've been going on for about an hour.
Wow.
And
it's been so much fun. It did seem
It has. And so thanks for Vanessa for tuning in, commenting live. If you have any questions or comments, let us know in a comment below.
Subscribe.
Below. Subscribe, like, share, subscribe. Is that what the YouTubers all say? Whereas if you want to get a audio book on us, you go to thedatadrivenbook.com. That E is very important.
So I was going to say, I did it this morning, and I'm sure everybody who watched my stream this morning went, "Hey, the E, you're missing the E."
Well, I saw it on your post. I didn't catch it live, and it was like, be sure to spell the right, like, and I'm like, what's he talking about? Like, how could you mess up the? And then I get to the point of the stream, like, dude, I've done the same thing. So we're excited. We're super excited to announce kind of the data channel, kind of the 200,000 download mark, which, according to my predictive models, we should hit whenever the show goes live on the actual podcast feed. And we're excited about data channel. And I was super excited that we got a couple of subscribers already. I was like, yes.
I know. I'm digging it.
I'm digging it too. So I just want to say thank you. And it does look, if it looks like it's just a couple of guys starting out, we are just a couple of guys starting out. Walt Disney, if he launched Disney Plus when he was still alive, before he made his first movie, it would have been sparse too. Obviously Disney's not, Disney has a vast content library. But I mean, that's when I was kind of talking about this before we launched. I says, well, it's kind of like Disney Plus, but for data, or Discovery Plus, but for data. That's kind of the vision for it. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe a documentary or two will be in the works. Who knows? Fun stuff. Who knows? That's all I got. Anything else, Andy?
Nope.
Awesome. Then we'll let the nice British lady end the show. All right. Well, that was for the podcast. So everyone who's watching live, thank you, Vanessa, for commenting and letting me know about that bug. It still exists. I got to fix that. Thanks for letting me know. And I will send you a coupon code that you can check out the channels. And of course, Vanessa, if you want to produce any content for it, just say the word. If memory serves, I think Vanessa also picked up an Odium subscription too.
Nice.
So Odium had a deal on AppSumo where it was like, I think if you go to Odium's website, it's like $1,500 to get started or something like that. But they had a deal where it was a significant discount. That's when we bought it. Because I think that if you look at what a lot of YouTubers are trying to figure out, like how do they monetize their content? How do they break free of, because YouTube can shut you off just the flick of a finger, like for reasons real and imagined, so
Right.
there's definitely a lot of concern about, like, particularly if you make that was your sole source of income, right? Like that.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to diversify, and we are, believe it or not, thinking beyond this.
Right.
So, we actually mentioned it in passing in the live stream, but yeah, definitely look at check us out. Comment, feedback, all welcome.
Yeah, and let us know if there's something you want to see that's not there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, our goal of this is to be far more data driven and customer centric than the existing platforms. No disrespect to them, but we're taking a different approach. I think it's time that the online learning ecosystem gets rebuilt and reimagined for the age we live in.
What we want.
All right. So with that, thank you to all our listeners to help us get to 200K. And thanks for watching live. All right. I'm going to play some outro graphics.
Cool. Thanks, Frank.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too.